regulatory and statutory needs to have a legally acceptable floating armory, that particular armory could be considered legal one.
Right. Another controversial issue I may ask you, relating to which cross borders of law, the sea and maritime law, is a northern fishing dispute and the bottom trawling thing. What is your opinion on this?
Yeah.
Don't we have sufficient laws to double them, or are we internationally pressured on the international laws to tackle them, or what is it?
Actually, Chanakya, this is not a legal issue. Right?
It's
this is
political.
a very, I would say that this is a conflict between commercial interest and the natural or the traditional fishing interest.
Right.
Of the two countries.
Right.
Because if you go back to the history, in this northern area, Sri Lankan fishermen.
But interrupt you there. So that means law is in place to tackle this if it was needed.
Of course.
Okay.
Because in the history, these fishermen from the north of Sri Lanka and South Indian, they used to fish. They were traditional fishermen, and also Colombo used to get a lot of fish from those areas. They used to traverse in this area, fish, and take it to the Indian fishermen would take to India, Sri Lankan fishermen would take to Sri Lanka, and they were very fishing in harmony. And they used to even have social connections, like marrying each other's, the families.
So what is the issue now we face?
The real issue is that, as I told you, now Sri Lanka had a very narrow border there of 18 nautical miles, which is now like considered under the 1974 and 1976 agreement between Sri Lanka and India on these maritime borders. These waters are called historic waters, because we know that these waters were there in Ramayana. The mythical epic, right? And there is the Adam's Bridge, where we believe that Rama had crossed this, or he has constructed this bridge. So we leave these epics aside. These fishermen were involved in traditional fishing, but then Sri Lanka and India used to have very defined, well-defined maritime borders, like 9-9. But what has happened now is that all this bottom trawling and so forth is a commercial fishing area, where the commercial fishermen, especially from India, have intruded into our waters. And it's not only Indian fishermen, but our fishermen are also sometimes going and crossing this border. So
it's not a legal issue.
No, it's not
more
a legal
political
issue.
And a commercial
the law
issue.
is in place. The law can implement all these things, but it's actually again now it's a political pressure coming with the commercial interests to fish in these waters as commercial fishermen.
Now, our government, with the ongoing development of the country, with the megapolis state, and we are thinking of developing Sri Lanka from island to continent. We also have a concept called making it the maritime hub. Now, my question is, with regard to law, because anything you can create commercially and economically or by design, but then the law has to be in place. Are the available maritime law in Sri Lanka sufficient? And since anything to do with, from listening to you, maritime is touching international, are the international laws in place, or do we need changes in order to make Sri Lanka the maritime hub?
It's very nice, because I see there are several folds in this question. If I start with, now Sri Lanka was considered a maritime hub way back in the history. That is why the Portuguese, Dutch, English, they used to come here, and they never used Sri Lanka as the headquarters. Like, for example, Dutch with the East Indies Company, they had the headquarters in Indonesia, in Jakarta. So Sri Lanka was used as a transit point of trade, and even now it is used like that. Like maritime hub is that mainly. So Sri Lanka, even before the Dutch, Sri Lanka was considered a very important maritime hub, and that is why even King Vijaya came to Sri Lanka, and he was washed away to the Sri Lankan coast, and then he considered that this is the best place. And then now what has happened is that in order to create a new international order, economically as a maritime hub, we need to create a new international order, 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 we need to create a upgrade or reform our legal system to come in par with this area in order to build it as a maritime hub. But in that respect, I see that Sri Lanka is quite lagging behind because the laws that are applied internationally have more application, have more impact on maritime and ocean related affairs.
So we need to sign for certain conventions, or we need to change existing law, or we need to do both?
It's both, because we are party to certain international law right now, where we do not have the local legislation.
Right.
Because as a dualistic country, Sri Lanka cannot be regularized or enforced straight away by international law. We need to have the international law go under the parliamentary lawmaking process in order to create a statute, a local statute. There we have to then the adopted conventions or ratified conventions, we still have to make local legislations in force. And some areas we have local legislations, but some areas we do not
What
have.
are the areas we don't have?
Now, for example, in the shipping area, now there are very important conventions called MARPOL, that is the Marine Pollution Prevention Convention. In MARPOL Convention, there are certain amendments. Now, we have signed the main convention 73, 78, but certain amendments that are important we have not. Like we have signed the protocol 5, but we still have to implement. Now, this is 2006 is a very important year because the International Maritime Organization is doing an audit. Whether Sri Lanka is in compliance with our undertook laws and regulations in the maritime sector. So therefore, we have to show when the IMO auditors come that we have implemented these laws in this country and it's in force. Now, that is an area where we have to now concentrate to show the International Maritime Organization and also the international maritime community that we comply with the laws relating to maritime law. But certain other conventions which are very important, like for example now the Maritime Labour Convention that deals with seafarers' rights for a decent work, still is in the process of ratifying. It has not been ratified. Now, even there, if I go back to the question that you asked, whether we can have one regulator, now there is a cohabitation or a interaction between the Labour Ministry as well as the Shipping Ministry, because both ministries have to get together to ratify this Maritime Labour Convention. So these are the areas that we have to work out and fill the grey areas in order to have all better laws being implemented for maritime activities.
And make Sri Lanka the next maritime hub.
Exactly.
Dan, Malika, Gunasekera, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for those valuable thoughts and insights. I'm sure our listeners, our viewers, and everybody will be guided and for going for the changes in the area.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And thank you, and we wish you luck and success in whatever you do. That's Law and Order for today. We'll join you next week with another interesting topic on law on the program Law and Order with another expert. And have a good night, have a good weekend, and enjoy the rest of the programs on Channel I.